Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining. Got a few checking in on chat.
Good stuff.
All right, I'm going to give it another minute here for others to fully get in live. From France. All righty, well, looks like we do have a number of people here rolling in, and it's just one after at the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, I'll pass it off to my colleague, to Duncan Marchbank, to kind of get things going. And here in just a moment, I'm going to do some quick introductions, and yeah, then we'll get started. So Duncan, if you don't mind leading us off.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for jumping on from all around the world. So today we've got a little presentation for you all, sort of around enterprise ecosystem setups. It's really about the challenges that any mobile forensics lab or operation faces when handling evidentiary data. So we've got myself, Duncan Marchbank. I've been with MSAB for 7, coming up on 8 years now, I think. I started off from technical support and moved into technical sales, and now I sit alongside the professional services team delivering ecosystem solutions and architecture to customers, primarily in the UK and Europe. But I originally started working with the Americas team. So I've got some experience all around the globe. And yeah, that's about me. Dale, if you want to give your own introduction.
Yeah, no, thank you, Duncan. Yeah, I've been around MSAB not as long as Duncan. I'm coming up on 6 years, but like Duncan, my journey with MSAB has been kind of similar. Started out in doing tech sales and doing a lot of implementations early on, but have moved over to the professional services team, and yeah, that's the primary focus, is working with a lot of our new customers and helping them with their vision and getting that implemented. So yeah, we're here to discuss a lot of what that encompasses, those challenges and solutions. So Duncan.
Cool. Oh, I guess I should have stayed there. So we're going to structure this a little bit. We're going to go through sort of the ecosystem, what that means as a concept, and how it can mean several different things, and how all of those are sort of an attempt to address the different challenges that different use cases present themselves with. From those challenges, we'll go on to solutions, and we'll talk a little bit through examples. So to start things off, I'm going to talk you guys through the sort of ecosystem concept, what it can mean, what it can encompass. And as you'll find with everything in digital forensics, it does depend on what the actual use case is. But in general, when we're talking about a digital forensic ecosystem, what we're talking about is a series of integrated technologies that are all working in alignment with each other. So in this case, we're often looking at workstations, whatever the form factor may be, that are processing or reviewing the data, being connected up to a centralized server that is able to do user access and control, software versioning, licensing, and usually alongside that, you'll have some data storage as well. The main benefits that you're going to see from this type of integration and this sort of all-in-one solution is really your sort of scalability, your accessibility, cost efficiency at scale, your operational continuity, and your management proficiency. So really the aim of all these things is to get each of the individual pieces of a digital forensic process working in concert with each other. The last thing you want is your management to slow down the work of your lab technicians that are pulling data and trying to review data, or they're getting stuck trying to deal with software versioning or licensing, that kind of thing. So we talk about digitalizing the mobile forensics process. What does this really mean? It means looking at the end-to-end workflow of digital forensics acquisition and investigation. And what we're trying to do here is take away some of, or ideally all of the pain points to allow quicker investigations and faster access to data. The way we kind of do that are with individual consultations with customers, building upon their existing digital forensic workflows. So when they're pulling data, looking through it, all that kind of stuff, how does that process work? And what can we do to actually simplify that, or structure it in a way to reduce note-taking, data input, just redundancy of that sort of extraneous task to allow focus on investigations. To that end, automated reporting of collected data and automated upload and backing up of data are going to be central to that. So you can see why an ecosystem using a single integrated network is essential for this sort of capability. To that end, the management aspect is essential. Obviously, any sort of lab operation is going to have a burdensome amount of oversight. And to that end, we know that the forensics process needs to be auditable. We need to be able to provide insights on the processes that are ongoing at any given moment. So that management aspect, that user access control to data, are all critical in delivering a much more efficient mobile forensics process. And so what do we talk about with that from the management aspect? Well, it'll be the configuration of the forensic workstations at the end unit, the configuration of a user's access rights and access permissions to certain types of data, the software versioning for all of the client systems, as well as all of the licensing for those sorts of client systems. And again, having that all through a single centralized system is going to allow you to have things like real-time data monitoring, who's accessing what, who's been working through what, as well as providing avenues for remote support and real-time watch listing, hash listing, all this kind of thing. So again, we're going to talk through a couple different concepts. My experience is mostly with UK law enforcement and policing. So this concept in the UK tends to deal mostly with frontline workstations, which are dedicated kiosk units. They may be scattered around counties or hubbed in local hub labs. All of that being controlled from a central location that could then be sent off to smaller units of digital media investigators, that type of thing. However, that's not the only type of thing that we've worked with. Obviously, scale exists. So in places like the United States of America, customers that Dale's working with, we're looking at countrywide implementations. All of these are going to require existing architecture or infrastructure in place. Some of that can be mitigated by cloud and virtualization, which we'll also end up talking about a little bit. But again, just to come back to what is the ecosystem, what does it mean? It's that full end-to-end set of processes, the management and acquisition and review working in concert together to deliver a much more efficient forensic process. Ultimately, we're trying to get people's eyes on the data so that crimes can get solved quicker. So I'll hand this over to Dale, who's going to talk a little bit about these challenges.
All right, thank you, Duncan. Yeah, and as Duncan was saying about what is an ecosystem, he highlighted some of the challenges that we do go through. Now, every ecosystem is going to vary in size and scope. And when we're doing our consultation, and maybe even right when we're starting new implementations, we're going to be asking a whole bunch of questions, because what your vision is and what your definition of an ecosystem is always going to vary. Everybody's got their own nomenclature. So we come in and we definitely understand, what is the budget? Everybody's got a different budget. And we've created ecosystems in various sizes, from 15,000, 150,000 to over $1 million. A lot of the things that we start to peel away when we have these questions is how many users and systems. At first, it may seem that it's obvious, but after finding out, where bottlenecks and everything else are, you can go from 10 to 100 pretty quickly, and even up to 1,000 users over a phased implementation. One of the biggest challenges, definitely, when dealing with an ecosystem is how you're going to manage your users and systems. In a lot of cases, especially here in the US, we've seen that you may have to travel on site from county to county. If you're doing a state implementation, or even within your county, you may be having to drive, from one side to another. So how are you getting there to do the maintenance? Are you managing that your own? Are you able to trust your users with technical documentation to update the systems? How are you collecting and securing that? What are your bottlenecks and what is your timeline? In a lot of cases, what we have found, when working with customers, we ask, am I the admin on my network? In some cases, they are not the admin of the network. And now we're having to play with a third entity, which might be like a state IT or a government IT, where, there's a lot more questions and challenges that do take place. So in some of those cases, can you even use your existing network? They may tell you, no, you can't get on my domain network, but they may also say we can set something up on the side. How are you shielding users from, CSAM? It is very prevalent out there when dealing with digital evidence. Do you have a system to help your officers and agents and those that are dealing with this to shield them? And one of the big things nowadays is definitely keeping track and uploading, keeping that evidence secure, and automatically uploading it so that things are smooth and following the chain of command. And then, speaking of the chain of command, we always talk about is what does management want? And in some cases, it might not just be management, but what do the court systems want? When you're dealing with the prosecution, they may have specific ways they want their reports generated when dealing with digital forensics. So we can standardize on reports getting generated out of our analytical tool that meets those specific requirements for their end users. And same thing with management. They may be looking at specific statistics. How much data am I collecting, a month? Is it how many gigabytes? How many terabytes am I collecting in the amount a month? So there's a lot of challenges or questions, I should say, when we're starting off and working with an ecosystem. Now, on top of that, with mobile forensics in general, we're dealing with a lot that's coming in, and nowadays 90% of investigations include some form of mobile data. I think when you go and you look at a lot of these, just on the internet, when something happens, people are pulling out their phones constantly, and that's a mass amount of data that is being captured just by the public there. So smartphones are going to remain the primary source of digital evidence for over 9% of law enforcement. Data and apps, they grow fast. That's another challenge that we got to talk when dealing with setting up an ecosystem. Right now, phones, could be a terabyte, 2 terabytes in size. Some are even larger, and the amount of data that might be with that user, if they've also got laptops, other multimedia, it's a lot, and that's going to just keep going up. And so the complexity of dealing with all those different form factors, those different apps, it's going to grow, and it's going to continue to grow. This was a quote that we pulled from New York City District Attorney. He mentioned that the single most important criminal justice challenge in the last 10 years, in his opinion, is the expanded use of digital or mobile digital devices by bad actors to plan, execute, and to communicate about crimes. And that's huge. So a lot of us grew up, in an age where, the internet was just starting, technology was just out there. Beepers, cell phones. We some of us have gone through the various stages. But within the last 10 years, with the smartphones and everything else, and like I mentioned, the ability to record data quickly, pull up your phone and just start recording. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot. And there's so many different devices that are out there as well. So when we're thinking about a lot of the bottlenecks and challenges, and when we're working with customers, a lot of them, when they come to us, is the main area where they're having the bottlenecks is the labs. All right. And these central labs, they are the most important ones, because they have all of the highly trained and skilled personnel. They are masters at the art of collecting mobile evidence in a forensically sound way. They've been through all of the training. They have the certificates to showcase they've been, approved in so many different ways, and they got their accolades. But the problem with that central lab only model, there's so many actually, but the need to physically send those phones to those labs. It takes a valuable amount of time and cost. A lot of the things that do end up happening is also when you're there, and I've seen it as well, is the amount of phones just on a shelf, connected, powered up with a brute forcer, just sitting there running constantly. And those phones, the ticker, it doesn't just say hours or minutes, they'll say years. And in some cases, it could be decades for some of those phones. The space that some of these labs, they're running out of some space. Now, the labs have not been able to grow as fast enough to cope with that increased number of mobile devices. Their storage, like I mentioned, the complexity of the extraction. Some of them don't have the ability to do chip-offs. They have to, in some cases, send those to a lab in a completely another location. So that can handle those. So this has led to severe backlogs in a lot of mobile devices to be extracted and investigated through the lab. Next. So again, there are some good pros. You have high, well-educated forensic labs personnel. They can handle all types of devices and extractions. They have well-established policies and procedures. And in most cases, they've helped either define or create those policies and procedures for everybody else as part of your ecosystem to follow. The cons on this is it's a high labor cost. It is also very hard to find new employees. When I go to the labs, in a lot of cases, it's 6-9 months for onboarding for all of the technology. And in some cases, to get the accreditation and the certificates, before they can go in front of the courts, finding those new employees, if they don't have everything, it could be a very long time to have those high credentialed employees come in. It's very hard to scale up. Not everywhere can you have a lab that is going to be able to handle chip-offs. Not everywhere are you going to be able to have a lab that's going to be able to manage shelves and shelves of phones in the background connected to power banks with brute forcers running in the background. It's, not every lab can handle that. And in most cases, because of that, they have huge backlogs. High volume cases take a long time to handle due to those lab backlogs. And the devices in high volume cases are often not even sent to the lab for the extractions. In most cases, those are going to remain where it's at. And we've seen where the lab has to go to the location to actually perform said extraction for those. So there's a lot of cons that can be out there. Not everybody's going to have the same cons, and same with the pros for that central lab model. It is definitely going to vary for your ecosystem. Now, the consequences for these high volume crimes, a lot of them that we also see is where witnesses and victims' phones are stuck in the lab backlog as well. And it could be for a very long time. A lot of instances why they feel like, why should we give up our phone for weeks, months? Is that reasonable? I mean, they may have the data, but due to the backlog, they're giving up their phones. This leads to low cooperation from victims and witnesses. I can't give you my phone, even if you say you can give it to me within 48 hours. No, we've heard that a lot. Suspects don't get their phones analyzed due to cost and time to get back the results and extractions. Yeah, there's been so many times where, again, the lab has to take their equipment out to wherever it happened, and that is not something that can just up and happen right away. So those phones sit as well, maybe in a warrant lockbox or somewhere until that extraction can take place. And then the other thing is frontline officers often don't even send confiscated mobile phones to the labs, even if it would be beneficial. In a lot of cases, I have definitely heard from officers and agents out in the field where, the phones, they're surprised when they go on site and all of a sudden, 5-10 other phones from other cases wind up. Oh, you're here. Hey, just to let you know, I've had these phones for a while. Can you do these as well? All right. It happens all the time. We hear about it all the time. How can we resolve these bottlenecks? So with that, we're going to talk about some of the solutions that we have on our side, and I'll pass the baton over to Duncan here for the next slide.
Cool. Thanks, Dale. Yeah, so solutions. Like Dale laid out, we know that the labs are essential, right? We need their expertise. We work in a incredibly high skill ceiling industry where the barrier to entry is very, very difficult. You can't just have somebody who doesn't know what they're doing jump in and expect to be able to acquire mobile data and analyze it in any sort of critical way. Yet there's still too much data for an experienced lab to handle. So what are we going to do? Well, what MSAB has tried to help varying agencies and forces do is work towards a distributed frontline model that, again, really stresses that centralized user access control and competency. So your lab stays doing what they're doing. They do it better than ever. They can focus on the most critical, the most complicated cases. And you have some users that are slowly allowed to perform acquisitions and perform analysis. So by distributing that across a wider net of the force, you're reducing your backlog. You're allowing better access to your data. It's getting seen by more eyes. Maybe, for example, in the case where you have a frontline officer, they've acquired something, they don't quite understand it, then they can pass it over to somebody who's maybe a little bit more experienced. But again, at least you're taking that burden away from a centralized location. So things are moving much quicker. In addition to that, you get some sorts of scalability. So as your backlog technically grows, maybe you can hire more people. Probably unlikely, but you could always try to hire more people. Or if you're working in an environment that has enterprise licensing, you can distribute the licenses to where they're exactly needed across the force. So if you're seeing areas that have a high frequency of immediate cases, maybe they need certain more powerful licensing capabilities, they can have those on hand. You can slush things around to where they're needed. Same thing with the workstations. You move them across your network, physical network, but everything still stays connected to your computer network. So all of your certainty around the machines, the forensic workstations, their capabilities and their licensing all stay centralized. All the actions, everything that's going on there, all are audited and sent back to a centralized server. So you're not losing your oversight by distributing it wide and broad, and you're not losing the technical capability that you have in a lab that's already proficient. You're not watering that down across the force. The idea is to put tools in the hands of users that will be able to use them. So basically what I just said. You're reducing your transport time, you're reducing your personnel costs, you're able to perform acquisitions on hand when they're needed. And to that end, for users that aren't going to be as technically apt as your lab professionals, what MSAB develops alongside all of its acquisition and analysis products are customizable workflows. These can be either installed on pre-existing workstations, or we sell them as a turnkey locked down solution called our kiosk or a tablet. And what these really are is they are designed to enforce your department or your agency's regulations on users. So you have to maintain a level of competency to use these sort of workflows, because it's going to force you to enter things per certain parameters. So all of your note taking, all of your case filing, all of that is going to be followed. In addition to that, you've also got other things in there, sort of like videos, help tips. So as officers are actually beginning to extract data, they're feeling more and more confident because they have that sort of assistance on hand that is going to remind them. Because maybe these officers are doing, maybe a phone a month, maybe not even a phone a month, but they still need to be able to, it'll be faster for them to extract this than to pass it on to a central lab where it's going to sit in a queue for months on end. And then it turns out that this crime wasn't actually that important, right? So faster access to data while maintaining that user competency and oversight. We want the whole process to be repeatable, predictable, and auditable. And so to that end, you've got things like automated reporting, right? So as a user is entering all of their variables into the workflow, their case ID, the phone type, where it was recovered, suspect's name, phone owner's name, IMEI, IMSI, all these sort of things, it's all going to be automatically ingested and then output into the forensic report. So it's saving that sort of note taking, it's saving that duplication of effort. This report's going to be produced in a PDF, and it's going to be saved alongside the case file with the extraction file on hand as well. So everything's all in one place, and you'll have insight to all of this sort of entry in the actual extraction file for in the centralized database. Alongside that, once a user has entered all of this data into the workflow, it's output their reports, it's all on hand. Wherever they are, it's probably not where the central storage is or where the central lab is. So you need a method to get that data to where it's going to be archived or to where it needs to be reviewed. So uploading that to a centralized storage location where other users can access it either for review or for archive, or for transmittal to the court if it's reports, things like that, is essential. And again, it's just moving that data around. Sounds like a very trivial thing, but the amount of time that you might spend doing something like copying it to a disk or copying it to an external drive and then mailing it or driving it to a location, hours and hours on end. Whereas with a competent internet connection, send it digitally, have it easily accessible, set the user access controls. Whoever needs to review it can immediately access it, get in there, start looking at the data. And again, coordinated investigations are going to be key as data sizes grow larger and larger and larger. As Dale said, phone sizes are getting bigger, but rarely is a case involving a single phone. We've seen, multiple investigations involving hundreds of devices. One of the benefits of XRY and Examine is the speed at which we can actually open those sizes of acquisitions. So we've seen cases involving hundreds of phones that are involving terabytes of data, and Examine will open that up within a minute, give or take. So again, getting eyes on that sort of data immediately is a massive benefit. as is sharing it, getting as many eyes as possible on that data. So you want it in a central location. You want to be able to access it from anywhere. And with that sort of ecosystem, again, same thing, all of your user access and user controls, everything's going to be logged when users access files, make notes in it, tag certain items. All of that sort of process is immediately logged, centralized, and can be reviewed. Where does enterprise licensing fit into this? Well, enterprise licensing is sort of a sort of management capability more than it is anything else. Really, it allows licenses to be moved where they are needed most within an organization. It allows also the capability for them to go anywhere in the organization rather than being locked down to individual workstations. You can have the software installed across your entire unit, entire lab, entire force. And as users are trained and become competent, the license keys can be distributed to them as needed. So you have the ability to set that sort of user access and control and sort of delegate the more advanced capabilities to the users who sort of need those things at hand. And I'm going to hand this over here to Dale. You can talk about this one because my voice.
No worries. Yeah, with enterprise licensing, and this is something that is new, and it, as Duncan called out, it allows for you to meet the need of your ecosystem. So in some instances, you still need to travel from location to location, but you want, when you get to that location, to still have the software and everything there, and all you got to do is just log in and ready to use. So enterprise licensing, how it works, yeah, there's a lot of things, and there's, it does help answer some of the challenges too. Leaving or buying a license that maybe is used once a week, that can be a hard thing for some organizations. You still want to have it there, but is there a solution out there where, things can be ready, but I don't have an active license on that machine? And what enterprise licensing and that shared client license, that's what we're given there. So utilizes our exec director and enterprise license manager system to tap into our server licensing, and then what we have is tokens that become available, and they're quickly and easily scalable in working with our customers. So in some instances, we talked about earlier, you might need to scale up for a rapid engagement. You might need more than you currently have. It's real easy for us to provide those updates so that you could scale in an instance, and then after that operation is done, potentially scale back down. The different types of products that are available too. You can see on the right-hand side in the image. An ecosystem consists of the front line as well as the labs, but also the investigators and management. So we've been talking about, how everything comes together, and this is one of the other new pieces that helps bridge everything. So when a license needs to be available for a team, you can see that one is available or it might be in use, and you might have to wait for it. So this shared license, you're going to have the client contracts and the license server to check that availability constantly to see if there is something that's out there. And in larger operations from like the East Coast to the West Coast in the US, as each time zone comes online, you can start to see, where things are needed. And as a time zone comes off, things can be scaled back down. You understand what is actually needed for your ecosystem's operation. Now, like I mentioned, if there's a shared license available, you're going to get it. If there is no shared license, then you're in wait mode. And in some cases, like with Examine Pro, our product, we actually still allow you to log in and view the data, but in a limited capacity while you're waiting for someone who has one of those advanced license tokens to relinquish and then make it available for somebody else. You can still get in, do work, while you're waiting for your token license. So the other nice thing about this, what this gives you, is the validity of time that can be configured for each of the systems when you need it. So in the instance where you have an operation where you need to take a laptop that's going to be out in the middle of nowhere, it could be out in the middle of the ocean, could be out in the middle of the mountains, the desert, but you're going to be offline and potentially no internet access, but you still need the capabilities of doing your extractions. So this allows you to say, hey, I'm going to check out a license, and this machine is coming with me on my 2-week op. So you don't have to worry about is the system not going to have that capability. You'll be able to give it that capability and make sure that it's available. And then once the system comes back online, they're able to check back in and relinquish that token to the entire ecosystem so that others can then either do the work that's needed, or it's just ready to be checked back out. So yeah, I would say a longer validity period does help for those that are going to go out in field operations. But you may also find instances where you want to keep that to just a few hours as well. You can set it up so, hey, I know this system, we're in a high volume instance. We kind of need to pass the baton back and forth. We're only capturing, pictures and videos, and these machines are going to have it for an hour. You have that capability. So if you need to scale and meet the mission, you have those options. Now, if the client is not network connected or is in sleep mode, it will need to be renewed. And, that's the one thing about checking out a license is at some point you got to put it back into the pool and you need to connect back to the server. So there are some expiration dates, and the user is definitely aware of, hey, when you need to work back in and check those back in. And, it's pretty easy to check things back in. All you're doing is just closing our software out. And there will be, in some cases, a pop-up saying, hey, do you want to keep it or check it out? But in other cases, we can configure and work with the customers where, it's check in, check out. But it depends on the mission and what the needs are. All right. So now we're going to jump into some examples. We've talked about the ecosystem, what it is. We've talked about a lot of the challenges and some of our solutions to those challenges. So we wanted to just kind of highlight and just bring it a little bit full circle here for you all. So when dealing with a frontline solution, there's a lot of things that are in play. You always are going to have your lab. But as we've been talking about, we want to streamline the approach. We want to include that frontline office, that street, that standard user to help reduce the backlog and collect the data that they should be capable and are capable of doing. Like we mentioned earlier, with those basic workflows, we can guide the user step by step on how to perform an extraction, even though they haven't done one in the last 6-8 months. It is very easy for them to just follow. And the same thing is getting all of that data to the investigator so that they can analyze that. So having that central exec director system where we're providing the users, those on the front line, that easy to use workflow, and they're then uploading additional details to the investigators to manage, investigate, and also with the labs if they're running into problems. Then management, they themselves are getting audits. What was the front line doing while they were performing these extractions? Did they follow all of the workflow settings to a T? They may have filled out all of the requirements, but prior to extraction, did they have airplane mode on the device during the extraction? Because we know in court they're going to ask that. Well, no, we caught that in the audits, and that is also within the reports. That's a teaching moment for that officer, and we've also got those on the management side to review. So the basic frontline solution is just, it definitely gets in and it solves some bottlenecks and some of the challenges. But there's a lot more to just a simple frontline solution. And yeah, Duncan, I'll let you talk about this one.
Sure. So when we're talking about collection, again, one of the elements that actually isn't existing in this slide, I'll mention it first because it isn't in here, is going to be training. So we're not suggesting at any point that untrained officers should be able to perform acquisitions and review. What we're advocating for is that with, a level of training that lets them competently perform acquisitions, they should be able to do that for simple phones. Maybe if it's, witness case it where somebody has handed on in some data off their phone, they should be able to forensically acquire that and review it quickly. Same thing with sort of simple cases, maybe drugs cases, robberies, whatever the level of criminality may be, that there's certain things that the lab doesn't need to investigate to such a degree that officers who have attended maybe 5-day training, 3-day training, depending on what how comfortable an organization is with it, they will be able to use one of these workflows and go through the process that will guide them to perform an acquisition. So that's going to be the first thing, right? So you've got data coming in from your wide net, which is going to be those officers out at their local stations, out on patrol from their vehicles, that kind of thing. And then you're also going to have data coming across from your lab. All of that's going to be uploaded to your central evidence storage, where it's accessible by whoever exactly you want it to be. So at this point, you can set user access controls to limit that data access to the lab, to investigators. You can version it. So maybe you want versions available that the frontline officers can then go back and review a secondary time. There's a lot of possibilities for the actual file management. But the important thing really is that the whole process is going to be have oversight. So throughout the acquisition, from the moment an officer gets a phone and connects it to a kiosk, even before then, they're going to be entering in specific variables that will then tie them to that acquisition. So case ID, evidence ID, all these sort of things, right? And that's all going to go into a centralized database that can immediately be logged. So at a glance, you could pull up an officer's acquisitions that they've done in the past year and see a full list of all of the phones they've acquired, all of the cases they've gone through. At a glance, you could go and say, what's this investigator been seeing recently? And it'll show you all the cases that they've opened, all the filters that they've applied. So you've got that sort of management inside to resource utilization. You can see who's using what at what times, what systems are being heavily used, what systems aren't being used, maybe they need to be moved around, all that kind of thing. To that end, you can also manage those systems. So any of the configurations, maybe the investigators are asking for some more advanced analytic capabilities. So they want to be able to have image recognition put on. Oh, sorry. Yes, I have moved on. Well, good.
No, I thought you actually moved on when you said manage. No, I got you.
Yeah. That was the cue for you to hit the next slide. Great job. But all of the machine settings for all of these individual different clients can be set per machine. So something like image recognition can be turned on for certain machines that might require it, whereas for other machines, maybe you don't want them taking the time to process image recognition, so you leave that off. All of that can be managed from one location. You don't need to send someone out on site to do it. You don't need to pick up the phone and ring the guy who's sitting there at the computer. Again, so you're cutting down on that sort of that end-to-end time where you can get the appropriate acquisition.
As Duncan mentioned earlier, I want to highlight is, with updates as well on the workflow. With our ever-changing digital forensics world, phones every year have updates, but the operating systems as well. And some of the ways to get the data, there might be another admin setting or something along those lines. With these workflows, you're able to, as the field changes, quickly update the settings as well. So you can provide good, meaningful instructions for your agents and officers when dealing with maybe a Huawei phone or Android or Apple with some of the more secure settings. So as those do come out, you're able to update your workflow and quickly disseminate that out to all the systems that are connected.
Yeah, it's a great point. So none of this is a single static process that once it's deployed, it stays the same. The point is that it's resilient and it can be updated and changed and moved around. So if internal policies change, the workflow can be updated to reflect that policy. New variables can be added in. New screens, can be added in as well. Same thing with the capabilities to extract the evidence, right? None of it, unfortunately, because of the industry we all work in, none of this can remain static. Just as with user competency, so as I started saying, training is a key element of this. And as we know, you can't just be trained once and remain competent. It requires constant work, just because we face a moving target with new handsets being released, new software versions being released, new app versions, databases are changing. So competency has to be maintained. And again, one of the benefits of having all of those log files from user interactions being updated is you can see the amount of work that people are doing. So offering things like ensuring that users are maintaining a minimum level of acquisitions over the course of a year in order to maintain their user level, or maybe they would lose access to the system. Those sort of things are, again, sort of critical to this distributed frontline model. You need to have a way to control the users to ensure that they're performing adequate forensic acquisitions and review. And so that's going to be a central part of this as well. Next slide. And again, to that end, your enterprise licensing adds another layer of this sort of user access control, where licenses can be delegated to specific systems at a need basis. The main benefit of this at an organizational level is that rather than buying maybe 200 licenses, you only need to buy, say, 25 active licenses, and then your 200 machines have it all installed, but only 25 people can use it simultaneously. However, on a need basis, that may be all you require. Maybe you can only have 25, maybe you've only got 25 sort of trained users at that single moment, but you plan on scaling up to 200, but all of those users aren't going to access the software simultaneously. So that user access to the more advanced capabilities of the software become a critical component of that enterprise licensing. And I guess the one piece of this that I wanted to point out, like we said, no two forensic environments are going to be identical. So the architecture for all of these things are entirely flexible and malleable. So in this example, rather than having it review stations be local to an investigator's machine, they could instead be virtualized on a server. So the investigator is simply opening up a virtual machine, and they've got their analysis platform sitting in front of them, and they're able to immediately grab the data that they're reviewing from their evidence storage. These sort of things, again, take that burden away from the investigator to do things like manage their workstation, and puts that as back-end infrastructure, allowing them to more quickly focus on the job at hand, which is to investigate crimes. Dale, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add about any of this.
No, I was ready to move on to the next one.
Okay, I was boring you. That's fine. I'll let you talk about this slide.
Yeah. All right. So going into a little bit more of the examples. So we've seen after a few years of introduction on Frontline on our side with some of our customers, how much it's really impacted. And the amount of devices where the Frontline has seen versus what the lab is now having to deal with has gone up, and it's really we've seen the benefits, and the metrics are there to show it as well. So with those high volume cases that are coming in, frontline are able to handle those mass incidents where everybody's pulling out their phones, and next thing you know, you're got 60 phones where you got to take pictures and videos down from everybody at a mass event. The frontline is able to handle those situations now, not someone from the lab flying out and missing a lot of that. The central lab themselves are then able to focus on those high-profile, again, challenging cases where they may have a device or chip off, or it's going to require something along the lines of our Pro model, X or Y Pro, where additional steps and details are needed to get the data off of the device. So that's where everything is left for the lab to just focus again on those challenging ones, and making sure that the labs are also hearing from the front line and as well. Both start to work in tandem, and again, the bottlenecks start to ease up. So before frontline, and in this example, we've got some, and over the 3 years cost before frontline, over 100,000 for transporting data alone. All right, so that's snail mail, UPS, FedEx, shipping potentially, or driving from one end of the state to another, versus after frontline, saving things, shooting stuff over via the network and the internet. So speed. Again, 5 to 6 weeks from extraction to analysis to maybe 2 to 3 hours to complete. Have the frontline users be the ones that are doing it right there when they have the device, versus shipping it and then it falling into a backlog and waiting multiple weeks for a lab to focus on. Security, the risk of data corruption. I still know a lot of organizations and entities that are using DVDs. They also ship things with USBs, and sometimes those USBs fall out of those mailed packages. So there's high risk when dealing with those. VPN security, things are over the internet. AE256, we have capabilities of making sure that the data that is captured is 100% secure in a digitally forensic way. It is logged that way. You can see it from that workstation all the way up to your central repository, and all of that is logged, and that your data is safe. Errors, Duncan really highlighted the training, and that should be one of the big things also to take away from this, is making sure your frontline users are adequately trained. The labs, they're going to have it, the accreditations as well, but the frontline users, to help those bottlenecks, there is training available so that they can do basic extractions, and make sure that they have the confidence to do it. Whereas after frontline, that dropped from 4% after a year, and it keep dropping from 1%. That 20% error rate is high, but after the first year, and with continued support from our team, we showed that the frontline was able to manage, and the labs saw the bottlenecks disappear. And again, like I said, that confidence all of a sudden skyrocketed. Beforehand, they didn't feel secure. A lot of officers and agents that I have met, they were Apple-only individuals. Hey, here's an Android. I don't know this operating system at all. I've never touched one. Well, you're going to learn today, sir, ma'am. And after the training and after a year of using, that confidence is just improved. And it's happy to see when we've seen individuals have now done over thousands of phones themselves, and they're saying, hey, I've done my thousandth phone today. That's awesome to hear. And then the resources. So the entire team impacted by all cases, advising others with lesser skills. So, when the whole team comes together, not just the labs, but the front line, the management, everybody understands what each individual is bringing and doing, and everybody's following their same parts of the policy and procedures. Yeah, after the front line was implemented, we saw less errors, more time for experienced staff focus on those major issues. They asked more questions. In some cases, they also provided more enhancement requests on our end. And, you know, the relationships definitely grew, you know, and that not just with the labs and the management, but again, also, like I said, the frontline users, the confidence is there that they, because they've had those resources. Duncan, I'll leave you on this last one here to wrap up quickly.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so just to bring it all together, just like we said at the beginning, really, when we talk about the ecosystem and the solution to the problems that modern mobile forensic data acquisition presents, the idea is that we want more of the organization to be able to contribute to this process. And we want to be able to take away burdens from key individuals who are able to contribute, right? So the management side is taking away the workstation component from your investigators. You've got all of that software versioning, the auditing, the licensing, all centralized. Your investigators have immediate access to their evidentiary data. They've got a range of powerful tools available to them, while your lab is still able to continue doing what they do best. Their expertise is not at all diminished by this. In fact, it's even more valued because they're the central resource really at hand. But it's allowing those other frontline officers to help take the bulk of the, we call it easy work, away from the lab so they can focus on the high level things. The centralized auditing, reporting, all of that good stuff is what allows this whole process to really function. All the management statistics from end to end give an easy use case to distribute the workload across an entire operation. Dale, anything to add there?
No, I just want to say yeah, thank you, everybody. Hopefully, you know, that definitely had a few light bulbs go off, answered maybe a few questions, maybe created a few more. If you all do have any questions, we've got just a few minutes here. Happy to stay on, but definitely thank you all for joining us this evening, this afternoon, or this morning, depending on where you are. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, if anyone has any further interest or questions, like, please feel free to reach out to either of us, these email addresses. We both work on the professional services side, so we are not sales guys, as you probably could tell from this pitch. But your local sales rep, I would say absolutely reach out, get in touch. You'll be able to find the contact numbers per region, or the contact emails per region on the MSAB website. And if anybody wants to see any of these products in action, we're more than happy to do that for you as well. So going into the actual product level, we kept this whole presentation very high level. So we tried to not bog it down too much in product specifics. But again, we are more than happy to go into that, and we can show you all of these capabilities in the flesh. So yeah, we'll chill out for a little bit and see if anybody has any questions. If not, no stress. We can save our voices a little bit.
See if there is anything in the Q&A. No questions so far. Can this work with Celebrite enterprise software? I guess the the quick answer I would say is with any lab, it's best to have all the tools or as many tools that you can, because not every tool is going to be able to get you the data. Do implementations that we work with also have Celebrite products? Yes.
Yeah.
So can our software work within an ecosystem that also has Celebrite products?
Yep.
Yes, but it does depend.
Yeah.
Depends for sure.
One of the things that we didn't really go into, but Examine, the analysis tool, has an enrichment side. So, you can bring in UFED files into Examine. We also have an enrichment tool called Cascade, which is a server-side utility. And so you can have that running on specific locations within your central storage server. So if, for instance, you had UFED files and you wanted to make them presentable within Examine, you could do that. Same thing with taking R file type XRY files. If you wanted to automatically output into like an open format, like an extended XML or anything like that, you can do the same thing. So you can use these utilities in a certain way to move the data across your network to make it reviewable, sort of however you wanted to. Like I said, no two forensic environments or forensic ecosystems are going to be identical. But at the end of the day, we realize that everybody's going to, ideally, in an ideal world, every lab would have every single tool available to them at any given time. That's rarely the world we live in.
Yep. Good question, though. Good question.
Cool. I guess so. Sure. Yeah, I mean, depending what the question is.
Yep. Yes. So if there's questions like on the extraction itself, our logs showcase everything that's going on during the extraction and the decoding, if that's what you're talking about. So if there's anything that does come up during the extractions, all of that's logged, and it's logged back to the central server as well. So if there's actually the phone fails in extracting, that would be logged into the central server saying, hey, this is a failed attempt. And you can see how many of those attempts the user does. Maybe they get it on the second one. Hopefully that answered your question, though. Next one, WhatsApp is my biggest challenge on version 2.2. I could see the DB files, but not the conversations. So with WhatsApp, we do have some additional capability with our extraction tool. It is called Photon, where we are able to go in and we're not looking at the databases. Now, we could still get extractions and get the databases, but we have other ways of getting data for WhatsApp off of the device that has been a huge success for a lot of agencies in the US. Yeah, I would be happy to. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know any known problems. I mean, for WhatsApp version 2.2, that sounds like a pretty old version of WhatsApp. My guess would be if you've got the DB files, you've probably got like the crypt files as well with them, which will have the sort of end-to-end encryption keys in them. And so you need to use those to actually sort of decrypt it. We do this automatically when we acquire the databases. Yeah, I mean, it's digital forensics, so it depends. Like, I don't know the phone you pulled, or we would need to see a lot more information to really say something about that. But my guess would be something with the CryptDB databases didn't quite go the correct way when you pulled that phone.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't mind answering a couple extra. I know it's not part of our presentation. These are tech questions. Happy to answer these. Now I kind of understand your
Does
first
it
one.
supported deleted data recovery for Samsung F23?
I don't have mine open. I can check here for a minute, or do you have yours open?
I do not have mine open. I have everything shut. It's a Qualcomm Snapdragon 750G. So it might be one of the ones that we can actually access through XRY Pro.
There's a possibility. If you, I would recommend reaching out to our sales team with the exact, model number. That'll help us 100% confirm.
And the state of the phone. We need to know. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you can give us a little bit more in an email, we can 100% identify if that's something that we can get into or work with you further on. And if anybody is still on, if you've been holding back on other technical questions, we've got a few more minutes here. Don't mind answering a couple more. All right, so if there are 20 phones that were imaged with Celebrite, each image would have to be loaded into your system. Well, I guess that also depends. If that's if you're going to use our analytical tool to review the data, and we do have customers that, yes, they have like Gray Key and Celebrite and us, but they use our Examine Pro tool as the analytical tool to review the data. Those officers and agents are able to import those extractions into our software, and then review those. Here, I have a question related to extraction. Does it support deleted data? Or you asked in the other Q&A? Yes. Show the links between the people's phones and the apps that they used. Yes. So another question here. So after 20 UFED images were loaded, would your tool show the links between the 20 people's phones and the apps that they used? Yes. Oh, Duncan, that's off the top of my head. What is that called? I almost need to open up.
Persons and connections view. So
yeah, it's a persons and connections view. Yep.
We would normalize that data from the UFED files, and then we would do some essential basic fuzzy matching on it to do entity resolution. So a lightweight entity resolution.
Yep.
So Examine would prompt you with sort of the phone number and then various different aliases across those 20 different extractions that could possibly match that person. Obviously, nobody saves their name of different people in their phone the same way. So, everybody's name may be spelled differently, or you may use a different alias on Telegram versus WhatsApp, all that kind of stuff. So what this would do is allow you to pull all of those different aliases together and really clean up that contact map. Because that sort of connections view is something that we have, but obviously it's not very useful if you can see that you have 20 conversations that came from WhatsApp and 10 conversations that came from Telegram, but they've got two different usernames. If that user is actually the same person, you need to put it together. So that's one of the things that the analysis platform offers. And again, we didn't really go into the product side too much. We tried to keep it a little bit high level. But if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, we can absolutely do a more deep dive product focused demonstration.
Let's see, you're scrolling on down. I just did want to obtain the messages from S29 physical and messages were parsed. Okay. Oh, you said thanks to that. Any others? Q&A. Very good questions. All right, Megan, thank you. Yeah, we're good on wrapping up then. So yeah, thank you all for joining today. Duncan and I's contact information is right there in front of you. Please reach out if you got additional questions, even if it's on something that wasn't on the presentation. Happy to answer. Oh, Chris has one more thing for what's that?
Oh, check the right ahead logs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Chris.
Chris Courier is one of our trainers. We should say. He's not just some very helpful stranger.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that does look like that's all the questions. So again, thank you all very much. It was a pleasure, and yeah, hopefully hear from some of you soon.
Yeah. Thank you all for your time, and yeah, look forward to hearing from some of you.